Hey everybody, we're Shayem and Chris, and this is Fan Team Radio. And we are back for the Formula One 2024 season. Just wrapped up Saudi Arabia. Chris, what's up?
Hey, yeah, the another race. We're two races in. It's been a good season, kind of start to the season, a little bit predictable.
Boring.
Boring, yeah, a little bit, but there's been a lot of off track stuff. But the big news in Saudi Arabia, the thing that everyone's been talking about is, unfortunately, Carlos had last minute appendicitis, kind of emergency surgery. So one place I probably wouldn't want to be with getting appendicitis, but yeah. And then the F2 driver, Ollie Bearman, stepped in as a reserve driver, 18 years old, was on pole in F2, took his place, and really showed up. What were your thoughts on Ollie?
I didn't know who he really was until he showed up, right?
Yeah, same.
And this is probably my ignorance of watching enough F2. I kind of watch it in passing. What I will say though, before we even get into the Ollie Bearman of it all, a lot of these guys in F2, what I'm getting the sense is the rankings in F2 don't really matter when it comes to reserve drivers. Like, I don't think Dragovic or Bearman or even like uh, Lo- why am I blanking on his name? On RB, Liam Lawson.
Yeah,
Like,
Liam.
I don't think they weren't always like how Oscar Piastri was like a series championship for every series that he's been in. Not all these guys have that kind of a resume. Some of them like are like kind of maybe near the top of the pack, but not like clear definitive number ones. And I think Ollie's kind of in that camp of F2 drivers where there's maybe a lot of intangibles that he has that he showed on track. I think Saudi Arabia is one of like his more like strong tracks that he's been able to perform on in F2. So it translated really well in this race this week. But just really impressive stuff coming in with really just one practice session, qualifying under his belt. Just the nature of an appendectomy isn't really something that you can account for early on. So it's kind of just happens and you automatically switch over. We saw the same almost incident happen with Alex Albon and uh, who was it? Was the Logan Sargent that came in for him when Albon got his appendix
No, it was
removed?
it was Nick DeVries. Remember?
Oh, that's right.
That's how
Yeah.
that's
Or
how we got
yeah.
Mister Nick DeVries in the sport.
Yeah, God, I've put him out of my mind already so much.
But
Yeah, so
that's a good point though. Like we could talk about that for a second. Is like Nick DeVries had an amazing showing at Monza, crushed it, and everyone was like, "Time to put this guy in an F1 car." Is it possible Ollie had the same kind of flash in the pan success, or is his talent more suited for long term? It's like so hard to tell with these guys.
yeah, so that's why I'm thinking that he maybe might need another race or so. I think what this race did help him do was cement a seat at Haas for next year, if
Yeah.
anything, because they just don't have a whole pool of drivers to kind of take from. And again, we talked about this last episode with Kimmy and Liam, that if you guys don't kind of dangle a carrot in front of them that's attainable, they could quite easily leave for another team. So I think you're right. I think it's not impossible that the showing that he had is something that he's going to be able to recreate if he was in an F1 seat. But I'm erring on the side of caution and saying that it might be improbable for him to keep the consistent pace up because we just haven't seen it yet. That's the only reason. But I don't want to take anything away from what he was able to accomplish this past week, especially in the last second. But yeah, Ollie Bearman came in. Where did he qualify? He didn't get he almost qualified in the top 10. He was about what 300 thousandths of a second off, or 3 thousandths of a second off from Hamilton.
Yep.
Hamilton gave him some applaud at the end of that, and then he came in, did really well on some of these. Saudi Arabia has some of the highest uh, turning kind of corners, and it has, I think, the most corners in the grid. So to be able to tackle it the way that he did was quite incredible. Do you think that he's gonna get a hot seat next year, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to tell. Like, it really just depends. Some of these guys, like, Liam potentially could have had the AlphaTauri seat, now RB, but he was like, I only want to be Red Bull. So I don't even think he wanted that seat because he doesn't want to get stuck like Yuki. He could see that kind of future. So but there was like an interesting comment from Ollie saying that he was like, he wants to give the car back to Sainz and, for the next race. And I don't know if that's because of the brutality he went through. Like these F2 guys don't go through as long of a races and at high speeds. That people talked a lot about his headrest. I don't know if you saw that picture, but
Yeah, there's dents all over it.
yeah, it was super dented just because of the amount of force that he was putting on it, resting on it, and things of that nature. Because he's just not, he's an 18-year-old kid, not fully developed. He's not used to putting 70 laps at the kind of G forces that F1 puts you through. So, it's a lot to tell. Like, as far as him going to Haas, it'll just depend on whether he thinks he wants that or whether Haas, um, has the opening. Like, I don't know what Haas's plans are. It's only been 2 races since we haven't had Gunther, so like anything could happen. I definitely think he deserves an opportunity in F1, but the problem is there's so many guys in the wings that deserves these opportunities, and unfortunately, F1 is just not about who deserves it, who has the talent. There's so much politics involved. There's money involved. Like look, Lance Stroll, he doesn't belong in F1. There's some Djokovic is not racing in F1 because of Lance Stroll. So it's like you never know what can happen. But it was super impressive. I'm both very happy that I got to witness that, and also a little disappointed in what happened to Carlos, just because I feel like we unleashed a supervillain or a beast with Carlos when he lost his job at Ferrari, and he showed that in Bahrain. And this could take the wind out of him a little bit. Like, you never know how long surgery takes. Now all of a sudden he's missing a race, that kind of thing. So I really wanted to see Signs continue to smash and put podiums and not give Leclerc the spotlight and all that. But it is what it is. Health over everything else. But yeah, super impressive from Molly Bearman. I wouldn't put him past sitting in a hot seat next year, especially with you know K Mag has got kids and he's getting a little older, and all these contracts are ending up. So it's time for a shakeup.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too worried about Carlos Sainz. It was an in and out procedure. He was actually back in the paddock like the day after. And if Alex's, previous kind of run at having an appendicitis kind of surgery and then coming back and being able to perform is any indicator of what Carlos is able to do, then I'm not too worried about Carlos. I think, I actually think it was great to see Ollie. I think, there's not enough exposure for F2 drivers, and now that we're seeing that that's probably to the detriment of the sport, and if F1 is anything, is they could care less about what's at the detriment of the sport as long as they get paid. But
No, I want.
we talked well, we talked a little bit about this, Chris, when we were watching the race together. Is like, is there a place for to say is take something like as asinine as sprint races and actually make it useful by mandating that F2 or reserve driver from every team needs to be in at least one sprint race throughout the course of the season? There's 24 races, 20 teams. It kind of gives a chance for these drivers to get some exposure, especially since there's a talent pool that's starting to surface. How deep does that well go is what I'm curious to find out now. Like, we haven't even put Kimi Antonelli like in public spotlight with the current F1 car, but we're shrouding him with all of this, like, hype. Is he good? I mean, I'm just curious to see, Peter Dragovich. I think I've seen him once drive the current Aston Martin car, and that was back in like 2022, 2023, and he's never got touched again. I hear great things about him. I just don't know like what that looks like. So I'm thinking like maybe revamp the sprint series to make it inclusive of reserve drivers and of F2 drivers or whoever's on the, whoever driver number three is essentially for these teams. Because outside of that, like we're gonna have to wait for all these guys to like have appendicitis or like, need to like get a, their tonsils removed. Like I don't know, like like and then by some form, Danny Rick makes his way back into it. I don't know. It's all a little frustrating. I really do see. Listen, I was listening to F1 has a couple accompanying podcasts. There was one that I was listening to this morning where they had Liam on the episode, and the thing is, Liam was invited to do the episode before they even knew Ollie Bearman was gonna be, racing that week. So it just so happened that Ollie was racing, and then Liam was able to comment on it. And something that Liam said was essentially like, you see how we're able to step into these races, despite the narrative that everyone else is kind of saying that like, oh, like they don't really need to be. I mean, they can definitely come in there, show their stuff, and now these teams have like a pool of talent that they could actually go to, as opposed to like, let's just try to bring people like Danny Rick back. Let's go bring Kevin Magnussen back out of retirement. F1 might be like the sport that has the most let's bring the guys out of retirement back in, kind of sport. I don't really see like like Tom Brady, that should happen once in a full moon, like he comes back to play football right after retiring. This is like the seventh or eighth time that I've seen like a driver leave and then come back. And I think it's really at the detriment to like the young stable of drivers that have a lot of talent apparently.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, there's so many. I totally agree with you. By the way, like, I'm getting tired of the old guard just sitting in there, and I think it comes down to two things. Number one, we talked about it before, the cost cap. Like, I think the one of the main reasons why Gunther went for Hulkenberg and Magnussen was just like two guys who know how to drive an F1 car and they're not going to bid it in the wall very often. He was getting tired of seeing, Mick put it in the wall. He was like, he had to deal with Mazepin for 2 years. And he's like, I just want two guys in the car that are going to get this thing around the lap and not bin it. So, because that's costing me millions and millions and millions and jeans up my ass. So, like, I think that's a part of it. And the other part of it with guys like Botas um, and others is these team principals and these teams that are like works teams or whatnot. They want that insider information of like, how does Mercedes do it? Like, give me some secrets. So they like hire these guys so they could help them develop the car and then hopefully get some young future talent down the road. Now, I think it's kind of gotten a little out of hand. Like, we're seeing the field hasn't changed in a while. There's not a whole lot of excitement. We've seen these guys, and I brought this up while you were over watching the race. When I used to race motocross, the intermediate guys were always more hungry. They were always more like fighting for their future. And when I was watching Ollie race, that was the first time in a while that I've seen someone like fighting for passes and complaining about being slow, just like and trying to make moves and stuff like that. Usually everyone's just kind of, if they have the DRS on a straight, they'll make the pass. And like Ollie was like hungry and fighting, even though he was struggling physically. So that was exciting to watch. And I really hope the 25 season is going to show us a huge shakeup in the driver market because as it stands, and we could get into this a second, it kind of feels like we already know how things are going to shake out almost from first to last. Like it just kind of feels, I don't know, standard at this point. And that's not the way things felt in 2021 at all, and 2022 even less so. Like we had lots of back and forth in 2022. So you know, I I'm ready for guys like Ollie and Liam and Kimmy and whoever else to come show their stuff. The sprint race idea is a good one, but the same thing with the cost cap. They're probably not going to put these young kids in risk of bidding it in the wall, even though the most likely candidate to do that is Lance Stroll. So, you know,
Well, but then that's the thing, right? It's like if you're afraid that they're gonna crash the car, then why are they your drivers at all? Like there's also that part of the argument, like these are $1 million cars or whatever. Why is that person even your D3 if your concern is that he's gonna put it in the wall? Like
yeah,
and maybe and I get it. Like if there are works teams or teams that don't have as deep pockets as the front runners, like let's take Haas for example, or Williams, then maybe the sport, like the FIA, like I think we talked about this concept, or I pitched the concept of like having buckets of money that are able to be allocated for situations like this that come from the FIA, from sorry, from F1. It's not, it doesn't come out of the cost cap, but what it does is it incentivizes the teams to say like, hey, every single race, you guys need to dedicate at least one backup driver to at least one sprint race for the entire season. If for some reason, like someone crashes out the same way that Mick did, let's say a few years ago, and you know the FIA could, or F1 could be like, hey, you guys crashed out. It's fine. You could actually use this pool of money that we have just for this instance. And the thing is, you're promoting as a sport, like funneling in new talent. Like this, like I guess one of the funnier tweets that, or the memes that came out of this week after Ollie's success was the future of F1 looks bright. And there's four pictures. There's one of Kimi Antonelli, Liam Lawson, Ollie, and Fernando Alonso,
Yeah.
which I thought was hilarious. And I do want to keep seeing it, Fernando, but Fernando, like he keeps his stake. He earns his stake at the table, right? So like it's so he's not a great example to use here because he's actually still doing amazing things, as you saw this week with him putting the Aston Martin in P5, where we're in a really competitive place, and kept George Russell off for pretty much the entire race. So my issue isn't so much with old guards that stay by merit. Like if you have Valtteri Bottas who just has given up on like essentially F1 life, like put a shelf, like put a expiration date on him. Like it, it if you see someone like Peter Dragovich comes on, crushes it at a sprint race, and Aston Martin's still not signing him because they want to keep Lance Stroll, then Stake at that, this is just all like an example sake, right? Then Stake can come in and have a conversation with Dragovich, be like, hey, Valtteri has checked out, he's gonna ride off into like the Icelandic sun, and we really want to extend an offer to you. What do you say? Then it puts pressure on Aston Martin to be like, oh shit, like we could potentially have one of our guys be taken away, and the whole world has seen how good he is on the like in the F1 car that we've been able to make for our team. What does it say he could just jump ship and go somewhere else and do well for them, right? So I get like the sentiment of like there's a cost cap, and teams don't want to risk it, but then you got to ask the question, like, why are they even they're essentially your D3 driver. Why are they even your driver if you're that afraid of them like crashing out, right? So and I would also argue to say like the reserve drivers have more time in seat with simulators and testing than the first two drivers do, because first two drivers typically have a lot of different responsibilities that they have to take on. So like yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to make this sprint race thing not as stupid as most people think it is, and not as useless. You could actually make this really useful, but it would require maybe, to consider your point, to reduce the risk of losing a lot of money for a team that can't really afford to, then yeah, maybe have a pool of money that is, from F1 that says like if you guys crash or total your car and it's one of your D2 drivers, then we'll go ahead and like we'll 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 spot you on that, right? If it's your D1 or D2 drivers, then that's on y'all. But because F1, we're trying to make sure that we have new blood come in, we have the best of the best, and that's not being, questioned all the time. We'll do this, right? So, like, I don't know, there's a systematic way to do all this stuff. It's just, again, F1 leadership could fucking care less about the finer details. All they care about is that the larger deals are brokered across Salesforce, Rolex, Aramco. All the money's there. All the stakeholders are happy. But Chris, I was trying to watch the race in 30 minutes on F1, on the official F1 like channel. Didn't have any commentary. it was all just like the car noises. So I couldn't even recap really quickly what happened, right? It's just I know I kind of went bounced around a lot here, Chris, but it's just I guess what I'm trying to say is there is certain things in F1 that are stupid right now that could actually be retrofitted to be useful. Sprint races being one of them. But I don't think something like that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is they're going to keep the status quo as is. They're just going to keep like younger drivers kind of falling off to the wayside while they keep paid drivers and really old drivers that have no incentive still in seat. And then that'll just be it until the market forces their hand. And by that, I mean audiences are like, we're just going to start watching something else. Because I'm not gonna lie, man. Like IndyCar, NASCAR, like they have dudes also, you know, that people could glom onto. And if a documentary series or something like that hits off, then I don't see why people that are like now kind of watching F1 who are really new fans wouldn't just divert their attention to another sport.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. Something's going to definitely have to change. I mean, we've had eras of dominance before the Schumacher, Hamilton, Senna, etc. But it's like at some point when people came to the sport off of the craziness that was 2021, and they're now experiencing this max domination. They're experiencing like less and less overtakes, the same old drivers that have been there forever and not really doing anything impressive. It will start to die off, and they will have to make some changes, whether it's cost cap related regulations, driver shakeups, whatever needs to happen. They're going to have to change it. um, I think some of your ideas are really great. Like as far as the cost cap, like even just like getting rid of fixing the car out of the cost cap would help a lot.
Yeah.
Like why is it? It should you should have a development cost cap, and that's what you can use to develop your car. And then if you want to serve your team lobster and crash your car every weekend, who gives a fuck? Like that doesn't help your development or help you win. That hinders, you know. But I want to see.
Too, what did you say before, Chris? There's too many cooks in the kitchen when
Yeah.
it comes to F1, FIA leadership.
It's actually kind of mind-boggling. It's a little even deeper than I realized. Like when you when this whole Andretti thing happened, and like you have the FIA approving them, but then F1 not, and like the teams are all involved. It's like how many people are involved in this fucking decision? It should be one body that's controlling it. Like Formula One should make the decisions on who's in Formula One. Why is like four different organizations and
Yeah,
all these people involved? It makes no sense.
I was actually thinking about this. For people that maybe aren't up to kind of snuff on what the hell we're talking about, the FIA is the ultimate governing body across multiple motorsport entities. And F1 is their crowning jewel, right? I was like, what would that look like in American sports? And that would essentially be an entity that oversees the NBA, NHL, MLB, and NFL. Think about how fucking powerful you would have to be an entity. And think about the business incentive for these leagues, right? They might seem like, oh, like you want viewer retention and like maximum advertiser dollars. Sure. That could be like literally the only like common throughput across all these leagues. But when you dig into the details where fans lie, you can't govern those sports like with one governing body. So I think foundationally like FIA just doesn't seem like I don't really know what it is that they do other than maybe like broker deals on behalf of these uh like leagues for lack of better words, but like why can't these leagues just find executives who could broker deals by themselves, right? Like maybe I just don't know enough about it,
Yeah,
but when
me
I thought
same.
about it in terms of like things that I can kind of digest, like I'm like how fucking stupid would it be if there was like a governing body across all American sports? I mean, there's Congress, but that's different. So like it's just it's really one of the I guess Major League Soccer has that with um uh not Major League Soccer, but I think also like European soccer leagues and like I think they have like a governing body that loosely oversees all of them. but it's not to the effect of how the FIA is. FIA is in like every single board meeting making like these decisions, where I feel like that should just be left to like the 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 actual like league, you know. So I don't know. I don't want to get too much into it because I know we have a couple more things that we want to touch on, but it's just something that I was thinking about, like actually just this past week in terms of like what a ridiculous concept the FIA.
Yeah, it's a little interesting, and it's getting a little crazy, but it's one of those things that it is what it is, and it probably ain't changing anytime soon because of the power. The amount of power and money and things involved are just it's too deep already. So hopefully, maybe we'll get a shake up and change of leadership, and Ben will step aside or whatever happens, and maybe we'll get a new era and things will be better for a while. But we'll see.
Yeah.
But
Ollie Bearman, the harbinger of change in F1.
let's hope. Let's hope. Speaking of, Ollie Bearman, new guys. Let's talk about the rest of the pack. Like, we saw like Fernando do really well. We saw McLaren and in Mercedes they kind of qualified well. I mean, Oscar and Lando qualified 5 and 6, and then Yuki like in ninth. Like, how do you feel about the rest of the pack and where they shake up after 2 races?
I think they shake up predictably. Short answer is
Yeah,
they whatever you thought was going to happen is probably going to happen. Kind of season. But let's scope in a little bit more. Let's take a look at some of like the more interesting storylines, right? So I had mentioned earlier that Fernando Alonso put the car in the P5. Aston Martin, surprisingly, I thought that they're going to be kind of far behind McLaren and Mercedes after going into the off season, but they're actually probably faster than Mercedes on a straight line speed, as we saw with Lewis, and how Fernando was able to defend George. Again, Fernando has decades of knowledge underneath him to kind of help him with that effort. But if we were to peer into kind of what the standings look like across Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin, because I do think Ferrari is definitively number two right now in terms of pace and in terms of
absolutely.
development, in terms of where their drivers are at and how comfortable they feel with the car. I think they'll pull away from the P3 teams, right? P3 teams being Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin. I don't have high hopes for Mercedes this year. I think what I anticipated last year going into this year was Lewis is not going to like give up, right? But I think he's just going to kind of concede this year to just chalk it up to whatever, a developing year. And this is, as you can already tell, like a lot of the focus is now on George, and George is the one that's been performing fairly well here. So I don't, it's, again, speculation, but I feel like maybe the team has already started to put the emphasis on developing George's car and putting, research into his camp a little bit more than Lewis is, which isn't to say that they're not going to help Lewis. It's just, it kind of, it comes with the territory when you're about to leave a team and you're still there for a year, right? It's one of the weird things about that. McLaren wise, I think Oscar, man, he put a hell of a drive this week. Fended off Lewis for the most part. Got it in a P5. Lando Norris came in at P6. Lando's starting to, and this is a storyline we talked about a little bit, right, in the first episode of the season, Chris, our preseason episode, where we were like, is Oscar about to take the race to Lando, and is Lando potentially about to stutter step, I'm very curious to see how that storyline, if out of all the storylines this year, I think that's one that I am more curious to see than the others. I think the Sergio Perez part of it, he looks super stable right now. I don't think Daniel is going to be breathing down the back of his neck like everyone is anticipating. If Sergio just keeps doing what he's doing, he's going to be shrouded with love from the Red Bull side. He's going to close that deficit that huge deficit that he had with Max in terms of points from last year. So I think like his mindset just needed to change. Instead of being like, I'm going to fight against Max, he's more like, let me just lay passively lay into this like plan that they have where I just like do the best that I can, and that's good enough because my car is dope. I don't have to beat Max. Whereas last year he was like, let me like take the fight to Max, which as an F1 driver you want to be able to do that. So I think in the top part of the grid, those guys are, that's my thoughts for them. On the mid part, I think it's a really smart small mid part. I think the mid part of the pack is gonna be Williams by virtue of Alex, some form of RB. RB still kind of the it's they're not fully there yet for me, and I don't really know what to make of them. But I think Haas, dare I say it, are making their way past RB in certain senses, just based on the first two races. They could all, crap shoot out by the time we're talking again in 2 weeks. But because Alpine Renault has taken the definitive last seat on the grid, uh, I think it just kind of promoted Haas to go up a bit. It promoted RB to, I would like to say RB to go up a bit. I feel like the RB is probably plateaued at this point. It's caused William to go up a little bit, right? Kick Sauber, they're trying. I thought Joe was going to have a really great race this week, but he ended up, kind of going back to the back of the grid with his teammate Valtteri. So yeah, man, I think the most interesting storyline for me is McLaren and the what's going to happen between those two drivers. The second most interesting thing that's I'm looking out for is how Ferrari is going to manage their two drivers and what Carlos Sainz is going to leave the season. Like if he ends up with more points than Charles, that would be an interesting conversation to have. So and one that I want to have, quite honestly. As much as I love Charles, I think I love Carlos a little bit more. Uh, and honestly, man, like the Haas story is now a little compelling to me. But I know I just talked a whole lot, Chris. What do you got? What are your
Well,
thoughts on
I think one
the
of the
midfield back order?
for sure. I think one of the most interesting things you talked about was Checo. Was just we've talked a lot over the last year and a half about Checo's kind of like his time is up. He's kind of old. He was shitting the bed a lot, crashed the car. He was completely being outperformed by Max, which is still theoretically true, but he's much more stable now. I know we're only two races in, but he's gotten P2 back to back, and he looks very smooth and capable. He hasn't been having the missteps that he was having before. And like I was so sure that Check was going to be gone. It's one of those things that if you're in Red Bull's seat, whoever's going to be running the team at the end of the season, uh, you don't want someone who can take the fight to Max because Max is contracted till 2028, and he's probably going to WW or WDC as often as possible within that time, depending on the 2026 regulation change. And so,
And whatever the hell happens with this off track stuff.
exactly, but it's like you just want someone who's going to put it in P2 and guarantee your constructors championship. So, like, if Checo performs this year, why make a change? Like, why risk, you know, like what happens if you put Liam Lawson in or someone else and they're like super aggressive and you have like, a Danny Max situation or like a Lewis Nico situation where they're like butting heads and crashing into each other and it's all chaotic. They like the stability. So it's just like Lewis and Bottas. Like they won 8 WGCs together because they had, not that it was Bottas the whole time, but they had the stability of Bottas and allowing Lewis to basically consistently win. So I think that was a really interesting point you brought up, and we'll see how
I
Checo
think another thing
performs.
I want to get your thoughts on is, last year, especially after they had that entire rallying cry for Danny to get a seat. The pressure was on for Checo, and then he did what he did in Mexico City, which was it made my heart hurt. Uh, those and I guess we're in a landscape where we're saying like, man, Yuki or Daniel could just come in and take over the RB2 spot. That seemed like it completely went away. Like that pressure. First of all, I don't think they take Yuki seriously. Like, do you think do you feel the same way? First of all, like Daniel is like not performing well. Like I just don't think he's performing up to snuff. And whatever happens with this Christian Horner thing could definitely impact Danny's future at either of these teams. But I just don't think that that pressure is there anymore.
Yeah. So my thoughts on
With
this
Checo.
are I wanted Liam to get the seat. I think Liam deserved it after, the races after Danny broke his hand. I think he had 3 races and he performed super well, like in the fucking wet, always consistently doing well. And I just totally thought I was like, sorry, Danny, but you've had your shot. You've had many years at top teams, mid teams. You've made bad career choices at times, and you're just not the kind of guy that you were when you started racing at Red Bull. And I really wanted that change, and I was surprised that they gave it back to Danny, and then again this year. But I totally agree with you on the Yuki thing too. Maybe it's a sponsorship thing. Maybe it's because he's a Japanese driver and he brings in a lot of sponsors or attention. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, they definitely don't take him seriously. And also, honestly, he doesn't take himself seriously. Like he hasn't controlled his temper, and now his 4th year. So he even said in an interview that like I'm not getting the Red Bull seat if I don't control myself, which was interesting because Saudi Arabia was the first time I've ever heard him be calm on the radio. Maybe he's like literally trying, but I think it's a little too late. I don't think he's a candidate. I don't think Danny's a candidate, and I'll be interesting to see what happens with RB. But man, I think we talked about this last week, but they have completely lost all the hype for me. Like talked about borrowing parts from Red Bull as much as they could. All this car V carb talk and Danny and yada yada yada. They're just kind of shit in the bed a little bit. And yeah, I think both of their futures might be over this year.
Yeah, I just think that they who's their team principal again, Chris? Let me look it up real quick.
It's the old Ferrari engineer, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the old Ferrari
We are
engineer.
checking. Hold on. We are checking.
We are checking. We are checking. Lauren Lauren Meckes. Yeah,
What?
Lauren Meckes. So I was listening to an episode of the F1 podcast with Lauren Meckes last week, and so I forgot who the interviewer was, but he did a great job at like asking some really pointed question. One of them was along the lines of, "Hey, we all thought that you know AlphaTauri is a kind of a feeder system to develop young drivers for Red Bull. Like, but then you guys went back and got Danny Rick, and no, but saw what Liam did, and still went with Danny Rick. Like, can you expand on that?" And what Lawrence essentially said, he took the really diplomatic kind of answer route, where he was like, "Well, yes and no. Our goal is to be a pool of talent that like we can potentially like help Red Bull get, which I think is so fucking stupid because it points to exactly what Zach Brown's concerns are.
Right.
But he was also like, we our ultimate goal is to go essentially win. So these two things seem so contradictory that I just wanted to like pretty much shut the podcast off. And I think the interviewer realized that if he pressed any more, that it would probably just become like a mess of a conversation. So he asked another question, which I thought was really great. Was, hey, another scrutiny that you guys have is that the relationship between Red Bull and Visa Cash App RB seems way too close for comfort. To which Lauren says, "We we try to stay within the confines of the rule. Like we stay within the confines of the rule, and that's all he said, you know." And I'm just like, so you admitted that the goal of the team is to create drivers to funnel into Red Bull. So in a way, you are helping them in a way that other teams are not helping. I guess Williams and Mercedes have a similar setup, but it's also like if James Vowles is like, I don't want Alex to leave, they have that autonomy, right? So he admitted that they're a feeder team. Then he contradicts himself and says that, but our ultimate goal is to win. And then he goes on to say that like there is no relationship with Red Bull that's outside of like the regulations. Either he is lying or the regulations are written so poorly and are so archaic that they didn't account for a relationship like this to happen, where an unfair kind of nature of two teams helping each other, elbows out other teams, right? So
I
I
mean,
think
I think that's what Zach Brown was alluding to was like, hey man, these guys aren't
100%.
cheating, but the regulations aren't in the spirit of good sportsmanship. Like
Exactly.
this relationship hinders competition. Listen, you can't have 20 teams, which or sorry, 10 teams in this in the most competitive automotive sport where one team essentially's goal is to never win, which contrary to what he said on the podcast is the case because if RB started getting 1-2 podiums, I guarantee you Red Bull would shut that shit down pretty quick or something would change. Like they wouldn't allow
Or
that.
like absolve all the talent that comes. They'll be like, all right, well, we're gonna re-sign all the engineers from Visa Ketchup RB onto the Red Bull staff, and they're gonna get first look deals, right? Essentially, like how producers get deals with studios in Hollywood. They'll be like, hey, we're gonna like no one else is gonna reach out to them because physically we are in the same. Did you see that they're gonna that Red Bull is opening a portion in their campus for Visa Cash App RB employees. Like they're gonna have a building with inside but separate.
Same, but different. Yeah, no.
Same but different. I think that it's and another thing. Okay, now that we're already on this fucking train, let's just go for it. So watching Drive to Survive. Remember that the scene where they're talking, Lauren, Christian, and Danny are just talking to each other.
Yeah.
I'm like, why the fuck is Christian there? If this is all a V carb decision, why the fuck is Christian there? And essentially Christian's there to be like, hey, so Danny's gonna take over the seat, right? Lauren, say what we rehearsed, so the cameras could pick it up. And Lauren's like, oh yes, well, Danny, like you're gonna help us like develop this car and all this shit. It's so much crock bullshit, bro.
Yeah.
Like it's literally and I don't want to take anything away from Laurent Mekas. Like I think he has a really great, like, outstanding uh, CV, and he's probably a really great technical resource for the team, but he's kind of in a position where he has to be a yes man, and you can see it, you can hear it, you can feel it. It's gross. Christian's gross. Like it's just all like I don't want to focus on it, but like I think Yuki and Danny are just too, like, at this point. What is it called again, Chris? When you're playing Grand Theft Auto and like you like non-player characters or whatever.
NPC?
NPCs, yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I feel like them, Logan Sargent, they're just like kind of there, Zoguan Yu, Valtteri. Like, there's not a whole lot going on. Like, what I really want is just to see like all of those drivers taken out with a cast of new folks. Like, just put in all the new drivers, let them do their thing. Don't let Logan Sargent ever like talk publicly again on behalf of F1, because he just sounds like an idiot. Like I don't know. There's no flair to him. Like, I don't know how I got to William. I don't want to go down that route, but yeah, I think that the pressure that was on Checo last year, that we had started bubbling up in certain ways, just all got deflated this year within race two.
I fully agree. I want all those changes as well. Um, and like I don't know if we can ever get rid of the relationship thing that we have with the teams. I hope that that changes as well. I'm totally on Zach Brown's side for that. Even though he's the bad guy within the organization of the principals, like this that kind of thing is hindering the sport. And again, you can't have 10 teams. Like this is supposed to be the 10 best automotive minds, constructors building cars with the 20 best drivers on the planet. And we're just not getting that in a full sense of the scale. And I get it. Every sport has to have its, LeBron James or Peyton Manning's or whatever. You have to have your superstars that are unbeatable, and there's always going to be a pecking order, yada, yada, yada. But in any sport, there's there's a day where like the bottom guy could randomly pull off a win. There's always that small chance in F1, unless Valtteri Bottas goes bowling and takes out 15 cars and hinders Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton's car, and they take each other out, and then Esteban Ocon's able
And
to win.
Lance Stroll wins.
Yeah,
Oh
like
yeah, oh yeah,
yeah,
Esteban Ocon.
when Esteban Ocon won the race, like like all that, like I get it. You're celebrating, you won a fucking F1 race, but let's be honest. If the crashes
It
hadn't
wasn't
happened,
earned. Yeah, it
yeah,
wasn't earned.
yeah. And Alonso fucking defended like a lion so that you wouldn't get past, which you would have eventually. And even Danny Rick at Monza, Lando was going to win that race, and they didn't want them to crash, so that they slowed him down. Like, is it earned? Like, I don't like. I just don't like that shit. I want these guys to be going flat out. That's another big thing in the topic we don't get to get on right now. But because of all these like safeties and regulations and cost caps, F1 used to be about quality lap after quality lap after quality lap after quality lap, the whole race. And now they're like babying the tires, they're babying their fuel loads, you know, degradation, blah, blah, blah.
I want to see some more Roman Grosjean, like just fiery crashes, but everyone gets away safe. That's the world I want to live in.
I want to see people fighting for wins at like with risk, calculated risk, not stupid risk, but calculated risk fighting for wins. And it's just like again, like I mentioned before, I only see overtakes when people were just like, within like 3/10 on a straight, hit the overtake button, hit the DRS button, you overtake into the corner. Like, where's the fucking, you know, pass on? I don't know. It just doesn't seem to be that thing right now. Maybe it's the regulations. I don't know.
If you pass too hard, you'll get 10-second penalty. So keep that in mind. I didn't even know that was a thing until right before like during the race. You were like, oh yeah, the regulations change. If four
Yeah,
tires
they
come off the
literally
track,
announced it the
then you
day
get 10-second
before.
penalty.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
were like, if you overtake off track, it's now a 10-second penalty. Which when you start thinking about these things, when qualifying and races are usually won by hundredths or thousandths of a second, 10 seconds is a fucking eternity. So like I don't
Even the
understand.
commentators were like, "That's kind of hard." I think even me and you were like, "That seems kind of harsh." And then
Yeah.
like a second later, the commentators are like, "That seems kind of harsh."
Yeah, I mean,
Like
it's
everyone thought the same
literally
thing.
unable to be come back from, period, unless you crash. Or unless there's a crash, get a safety car, serve the penalty under safety car, then go in the order and you get to reset. So unless you're lucky, your race is over off of one overtake. I just don't
And then
agree.
do you see? And then Checo got the unsafe release in front of Alonso, which could have caused an even bigger issue in the pits. Not just for them two, but if they crash in the pits, everyone behind them now cannot go anywhere. You
Right.
know, and he got what 5 seconds for that.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Like, God, we could talk about this shit for hours, but I just, they need to take a step back after this year and just like make a fucking rule book and stick to it and agree on this shit. Like, anyways.
All right,
Ah.
let's on to the next, Chris. On to the next. So, I know there's we had talked about kind of the off track situation with Red Bull, and it still seems like a revolving door of news and fake news, and it's really hard to say. But what do you think is going to happen? So, as things stand right now, both factions of Red Bull, the Thai and the Austrian side have met. They've come to some sort of a consensus. Whether that's they're going to keep Horner or not is yet to be seen. Helmet has gone on record to say that his job is now safe. Max has gone on to record to say that if Helmet leaves, he leaves. Christian's gone on to record to say that it ain't my fault. you know what? Like, what do you make of this? What do you think would the obviously the best case scenario is that nothing happens and that everyone stays in place, but what do you think realistically is going to happen when it's all said and done?
I mean, I don't want to speculate on facts because I think the true facts of all this shit have never come to light. There's probably some semblance of truth out there for on every aspect, but it. I think my most likely scenario is that nothing happens, just because of potential legal issues on all sides. However, I think it's very clear. that the one person that nobody really has the backing of, except maybe the Thai side or whatnot, is Christian. Like for whatever reason, like when Christian was going through this whole fiasco, he was Max was asked to back Christian publicly, and he wouldn't do it. He's like, "No, I'm not going to do it." And then the second Helmet was under question, Max was like, "It's Helmet. If he's gone, I'm fucking gone." Which, like, even if you're loyal to the guy and even if he helped you get your career started, I just didn't like that comment from Max only because you're 25 years old, like, and you're like, you can't think for yourself, or like if Helmet goes, like, you're like, if he goes, I go. And it's like, what kind of like it just feels a little like childish, but I really don't know what the inner workings of relationships are. But it seems like Helmet and Max want Christian the fuck out of the team. And I think it's very telling after what Max did is that Max Verstappen has basically control of Red Bull because they were ready to like let Helmut go, suspend him or whatever. Max came out and said, "I'm fucking leaving," and then all of a sudden, Helmut's keeping his job. It sounds like has the cards all in his hand, and now the rumor was came out that now they're reconsidering letting Christian go, and I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's like all of that based on like the threat of Max leaving. That's a lot of power for a fucking driver to have. So
Yeah.
I
And it's also like one thing, Chris, I want to mention is that a lot of these reports are coming from like just different sources, and some of them are like, reputable sources. I think the one that broke earlier yesterday about about the Thai Austrian factions of Red Bull meeting what came from a German outlet, and then that got refuted also by Red Bull saying like, oh, like that's not true. So, we'll have to let the dust settle. But from a fan's perspective of the team, like, do you think even if everyone stayed put, just given like the friction that's there now, right? Like all the cat's out of the bag essentially in terms of like what people think of each other, what the big like power players think of each other. Do you think like Christian's shameless enough to just like be like, all right, I'm just gonna put this behind me and keep on keeping on? Do you think Helmet is like his senility is gonna like take over and like he's just gonna forget that he said any of this? Like, what do you think? Like, do you think they're gonna go back to normal, or do you think that this is gonna cause like a everlasting rift? There's also talks of Adrian Newey leaving to go do the Ferrari Le Mans project, which is something that he always wanted to kind of do. So it would be completely out of F1 altogether, right? So like it seems like a lot of like things are kind of in motion that can't be taken like you can't put Pandora back in the box kind of thing, right? So do you think that even if all the guys are like physically stayed put, that it would still be the same I guess operational kind of smoothness that's gotten Red Bull to where they are right now?
listen. I think 100% that Christian is going to continue with the story of all this is BS. It's all behind us. Continue as normal. I mean, you still have after Max wins, you have Christian coming over the radio after GP, being like, "Oh, Max, congratulations! What a perfect performance!" And I was like, it was almost awkward for me when that came on because I was thinking about how Max like didn't support you publicly and how he threatened like Helmet, which obviously Christian is wanting to get rid of Helmet, all this stuff. So it's like I think Christian is basically just like, let's get back to the status quo. So if I had to guess, my ultimate, this is what's going to happen is that nothing is going to happen this season. Christian's going to play along. Everyone's going to play along. Max is going to win championship, WDC and WCC. And then in the off season, Christian's going to get let go or some big shakeup is going to happen. And, maybe Adrian leaves, maybe Max leaves, maybe Christian leaves. Who knows? There will be a change. I think that maybe they'll all like put their heads down, get this year out of the way while everyone's in the weeds making plans for next year. And we won't know the truth of it until then. But I
You
just,
know, me some funny ass shit. Christian Horner goes to kick Steak Sauber and wears lime green as a new team principal.
and then he drinks the lime green Red Bull on the pit wall every race.
Yeah, and ever just longingly looks over like over the pit wall every race,
Yeah,
see what could have been.
yeah. Like
Wait, click or cue the sad music. We never get to use it.
it's. I don't actually. I deleted it on accident. So
Oh man,
we'll we'll get it loaded up next time. But
next time Charles crashes out or has power issue, we'll cue it for them.
100%. But that's actually a good point. We could talk about for like 2 seconds. If Christian got fired, and let's just say the inappropriate allegations against him aren't ever brought up again. I know the woman's taking him to civil court, all this stuff, but maybe it never goes anywhere. Let's say that he's able to be hired. Does another team fight to pick him up? Do you think another team picks up Christian Horner for their TP, or could anybody even afford
Alpine, bro.
him?
I don't think Bruno Famin's a fucking like real team principal, bro. Like
uh,
I sorry, I just don't think he's the guy.
Actually, that's a really good point. Like I wanted Mattia, but now the only thing I want is a Gunther Mattia Netflix documentary special where they drive around in Fiats and drink wine. That is the only thing I want
Yeah,
to come out of F1. But yeah, Christian going to
yeah.
Alpine,
Mattia looks like he's in a great spot. I don't think Mattia is gonna want to go back into F1 at all.
it's like when you get out of CAA and like you miss it a little bit, but you have those scars that you never want to go back. Like you're like,
Yeah.
wow, I'm actually like calmer and happier now. Even though
Even
like
if like WME like reaches out, you're like, I don't want to do that either.
yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. I'm good. Uh, but yeah, like who knows? The off track stuff, again, the facts aren't probably truly out there and we don't need to speculate, but it's like one of those things that we may never know the true extent, but I think we'll find out at the end of this year, if not sooner, what really is going to end up happening. But I definitely think the two sides aren't going to play nice indefinitely. So we'll see.
Yeah. Cool. Should we go to winners and losers?
Yeah, let's do it.
All
Uh,
right. So who you got this week for your winners?
well, obviously, I think we're both going to have Ollie Bearman on there for the winners. Like outstanding performance, um, just all around. Like I hope, obviously, I want to see signs back in the seat for Australia, and I'm sure we probably will. The short recovery time. However, if Ollie Bearman was in that seat as well, I would very much like to see how he performs again. It would be great. Um, and then I'm going to keep putting Max on there for the time being. He's won 19 out of the last 20 races, which is fucking mind boggling. And at this point, Max is going to destroy the sport himself. He's going to make it so incredibly boring. And I'm here just to watch him break every record of the sport. Whether he's, a piece of shit behind the scenes or not, or whatever, trying to oust the team or he's innocent, all that kind of stuff. He is a monster behind the wheel. And a little piece of crazy information I found out afterwards is that Max was up at 4 a.m. Saudi time racing iRacing the night before the GP. So he was on there like racing with his friends, and like all the guys were like, "Isn't it fucking 4 in the morning where you are?" And he's like, oh yeah, I guess I'll go to bed." Like that's insane. Guy is a monster. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I have Ali. We talked about him so much. I don't want to take the entire segment on talking about him anymore. But honestly, I'm gonna put Haas up there as a winner this week. Surprisingly, even with K Mag's like 20-second penalty, he was able to put in a really defensive effort to make sure that Hulkenberg gets that 1 point for the team. I saw Io Himatsu's Komatsu's reaction to it afterwards. He seemed really pleased. They have some performance going on in that car, right? I think there's a little bit of stability there. Obviously, with Alpine, sinking themselves, it gives Haas a little bit of room to get their way up the podium. Up the ranking. So definitely a win for Haas this week. Alonso, I'm going to put him into the winner circle as well. Just getting a P5 out of that Aston Martin, trying to, almost being taken over by George Russell the entire race couldn't have been easy. So want to give the credit to the old man, and Oscar Piastri, outshone his his teammate Lando uh, by almost, I think it's like a little bit less than a hundredth of a second, but still was able to really qualify him, out qualify him, and then again, uh, 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 beat him outright with a much bigger gap in the race. So I think great week for Oscar, and I really want to see him continue that. I think he's actually starting to become one of my more favorite drivers on the grid.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with you
Um,
there with Piastri. I think Lando and Piastri are probably the two closest in talent and skill level at the moment, as far as teammates go across the spectrum. And I think Piastri did a really good job of closing the gap from last year. Like he had some really good performances last year, but there was definitely moments where like Lando showed he had more experience and could build up a gap when that experience was needed. And I think Piastri did an amazing job from last year to this year closing that gap and is now going to take the fight to Lando. And I think it will probably be the most interesting teammate battle on the grid. And, as you predict, I think Piastri has a good chance of coming on top. We'll see what happens.
yeah,
How about
yeah,
your
absolutely.
losers?
Well, man, we didn't talk about him at all, and probably for a good reason. But Pierre Gasly, look, it wasn't his fault. I think it was like a powertrain issue or something to
Gearbox,
that
yeah,
effect,
before in the
gearbox
formation
issue.
lap.
Yeah, sucks, but it's indicative of Alpine season, right? It's really early on still, so if they were to give up right now, then it would be a really, really long season for them. But it's tough to see him in the spot right now. I I don't know, man. I really don't know how to rectify the season. He's actually, I think he's P21
Yep,
in a grid of just 20 folks.
because Ollie
I mean,
Bearman,
obviously
yeah.
because of Ollie, but that's just a shitty thing to see on a graphic card, you know? Like that's just a hard thing for a driver to take in. So I'm gonna put Pierre Gasly up there. Stake, Sauber. I thought Joe was gonna have a decent race and at least come in like P11 or so, but man, did they really fuck up the last bit of that race, and Joe ended up in last place. Valtteri was right above him in second to last place, and that's because Lance and Pierre were both have to retire. Um, Logan Sargent, I think it's gonna be the last season. If I were to put money on it, I'd put a lot of money on this being Logan Sargent's last season in F1. I don't have a whole else lot to say because he doesn't really have a whole lot to say. And then I'm gonna put V Carb in there as well. Visa, Cash App, Red Bottoms. I don't know, man. Like this, it's just two two drivers, neither of them taken seriously. One of them you just have because of marketing ploy. The team principal is a very big yes man, even though he could, if he had the autonomy, I think he could probably build out something for himself that's really competitive. I'm just not the biggest fan of how they performed this week. So yeah, those are going to be my losers for the week. Who do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna agree with you there. Just I'll touch on Gazzy real quick. Like, yeah, it really does suck to see it. Like, he's one of those guys is talented, and he's had a lot of kind of a string of bad luck. But every single time those thoughts come into my head where we talk about how unlucky this guy is, then in my mind comes back to motherfucker lives in Monaco, makes seven figures a year, has a tripod for, in between his legs, according to him. And, so it's like, yeah,
Wait, does he? How do you know that?
because that's what every year the F1 drivers do a secret Santa thing, and one of the drivers gave him a tripod, and it's because
I didn't know this.
he also did this thing. There was a Grill the Grid on F1. Have you ever watched that segment, like the little YouTube content series called Grill the Grid? Anyways, there was
No.
they were asking the drivers what their nickname was, and Gazzy was like tripod, and like I was like, why do they call you that? And he was just like kind of gave a wink, and then I forget who the driver was in the Secret Santa, but somebody gave him a tripod, and he was like, "Oh God, fucker!" But yeah, that's like he's self-proclaimed. Let's just say well endowed. So, but yeah, no, these guys are.
You can't self-proclaim well endowedness, man.
Well, that's Pierre Gasly, but he's got a beautiful woman. He drives F1 for a living. Like things could be worse. As much as it sucks, I can't feel too sorry for the guy. But I got signs on my losers, not because he's a loser, but obviously Going through an appendectomy sucks, but I really think he has something to prove. He's fighting for the best seat possible, whether it's Mercedes or Red Bull or whatever. And I'd hate for anything to interrupt that. Like you said, I'm not too worried about it, but it's possible. And I really wanted to see him continue that streak versus having a break. I'm going to put Danny Rick on there just because he had a 40 something second pit stop. Yes, we've talked about him ad nauseum. He has kind of lost it. He's sort of out of the sport from my point of view, and I think yours as well. But he keeps running into bad luck as well. And then I'm just going to put Hamilton on there just because he's being outperformed by George. Um, and it might just be because he's taking a step back, but I think he just has an issue coming to terms with the ground effect cars. Ever since we've changed the regulations, he's kind of struggled. And I know there was the zero pod issues, all that, but I think Hamilton just may be struggling slightly getting grips on this generation of cars, or maybe Abu Dhabi 2021 just took the fight out of him a little bit, knowing that the race director could just fucking take it away no matter how good he drives. Who knows? But I want to see Hamilton come strong, take the fight to George, and that way we can see him fight for an eighth championship at Ferrari. Um, my hot seat. I know you said a few minutes ago that right before we started strolling, going nowhere, but I'm going to put him in my hot seat at least one last time because if you're on the grid with Logan Sargent and an 18-year-old rookie who's never been in an F1 car and you're the only one who bends it by hitting the same wall you hit in qualifying, you deserve to be in the fucking hot seat. Sorry, Lance. I know we've talked about it a lot. You've actually impressed me sometimes, but you're in the hot seat because, stop fucking up.
Yeah, I mean, like, if I didn't have Danny Rick on my hot seat, I'd probably have Lance Stroll.
Yeah.
But I do have Danny Rick on my hot seat. I think the unless he makes like a cataclysmic, like not I don't think that's the right word to use, but like a drastic turnaround to fight for points in like the next couple of races, I think he's pretty much a dud. I know he had that 40 plus second pit stop, which I didn't even see on the broadcasting, so I'm glad you pointed that out. But and I guess that's another issue with the Saudi Arabia broadcast is not only that they don't show crucial parts of a race, but that they also can't color correct for bright orange across all of their
Every single
fucking
time it was like, is that a
vehicles.
Ferrari? Oh, that's a McLaren. Every
No,
time.
it's like a McLaren on the like turn four camera. That camera sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, Danny Rick. Listen, man, I might be saying something heretic here, but I really liked him before. Like, even when he wasn't doing all that great, but he was at Renault. Even when he went to McLaren, I was like, all right, like I guess I get it. Maybe I'm just like not up to par with how drivers make their decisions. I don't really like Danny Ricciardo a whole lot anymore, man. Like I think like he's one of those guys that's just like, oh, like my like I think he's just kind of in a space where he's just delusional. Like I just and I don't know what's the symptom of that. Maybe it is because he got ousted from Red Bull in a way that probably scarred him for the remainder of his career, and he just doesn't want to admit it. But like he likes doing the whole "I'm chill, I'm gonna do like a thing with Will Arnett every now and then," like that is cool. Let's just lean into that, man. Like this whole thing where you're going back and forth from F1 through the entire grid, like the only person that could do that is Fernando Alonso and not have people hate him. Because the thing about Fernando is wherever he goes, he improves the situation of that team, even if he's only there for a little while. Danny goes somewhere, kind of scorches the ground, plays the victim, walks away, and then gets another like chance at it. There's something about that just has turned me sour against him. Like I just I don't hate him. Like it's not like that. I just don't like him.
Yeah.
Whereas before I really liked him and I thought he was a really great like personality to have around.
Maybe it's Drive to Survive that's kind of tainted this for me, but I am getting tired of the whole like I have something to prove. Like this is it.
Yeah,
Like like
100%,
like
100%.
it's like you've had your chance to prove it and you're a professional F1 driver and have been for a long time. So do it or don't. Like
Yeah.
There's no lead up time to this. It's like now's the time. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I
Any more of that? Any more of that like that kind of dialogue? And I'm gonna unfollow him on Instagram. Is what I'm gonna do.
oh shit,
I swear to God,
that's a
Chris. I
serious
swear to
threat.
God, Chris. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So we got two races in the bag. Like again, they've both been kind of predictable. It's been a little lackluster. We've had the off track stuff to sort of liven up the scene for a little bit, but that probably won't go on forever. So we have a week off, and then we're headed to Australia, which will go back to being the season opener next year. So excited for that. But yeah, what are your predictions for Australia?
My predictions: Max, Checo, Carlos Sainz.
My man. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think it's impossible not to put Red Bull 1-2 at the moment. Even though
Yeah, especially now that Checo's figured out, like, all right, I'm here to do a job, not here to win a championship.
right. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and do something a little crazy, and I'm gonna put Oscar Piastri just because in that third spot because I want to see Oscar home podium a home race, and I think
I'd love to
after
see that.
after him getting P4 in the last race, I think it's totally within the realm of possibility. I think the Ferraris maybe have to make some mistakes, some strategy errors, whatever. But I think it's totally possible. So I want to put Oscar just to put it out there in the universe for it to be a possibility. But yeah, we have next week off, but we'll be back for Australia to bring you all the action again and talk about all the craziness. And hopefully, we'll have some off-track resolutions. And Felipe Massa will take Lewis Hamilton down a step, down to a six-time world champion. No, that's never going to happen.
That's not gonna happen, man. If Reggie Bush can't get his Heisman Trophy back, Felipe Massa sure as hell ain't getting
Yeah,
his shit.
sorry, Massa. Like keep trying, keep fighting the good fight, my friend. But yeah, I think you lost, and it is what it is.
Yeah. Sorry, Reggie Bush.
Sorry,
I
Reggie.
never get to say that enough. All right,
All right,
well, we'll see you guys again. We'll be back on I believe it's the 24th is the race, so we'll be back on the 25th with a new episode.
awesome, guys. See you then.
Until then, bye everybody.
Peace. Thank you for listening. Shayem and I would love for you to join the Fan Team Radio community. So please like, subscribe, or follow on your platform of choice, and we'll see you next time.